Karen Willey. I'm the Zoom moderator. We'll have a short business meeting led by Jean Doobie, and then Margie Haas, our program director, will introduce our wonderful speaker, Terry Rich. Few housekeeping items. So this is a webinar because we have so many people in attendance. So far we have 60, but could go up close to 100 we had registered. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions to Q&A. We prefer Q&A because it's easier to keep track of, but we definitely will be monitoring the chat as well. And if you have any questions about the Zoom, feel free to use chat, and I'll be sure to answer anything through there. So as time allows, Terry will answer questions at the end, or he said even if there's something that comes up while he's speaking, feel free to ask. So I think that's it. I will now turn it over to Jean Doobie.
Do you want to put up your screen that you had all the items on?
Yeah, let me there.
Okay. So, shall I recite?
Yeah, or if you want to, or if you want me to, yeah, go ahead.
Hi everybody, Jean Doobie here. Glad you're here. Wonderful to have you along. A few announcements. Sue Herring, who is works with the art committee, is asking for member art and photo show participants for the January 10th. That would probably be for February. Yeah, the month of February at the Nature Center. So if you have any original artwork or photos, and they must be framed or ready to hang, and you have to contact for an application to the sas.art.committee@gmail.com. As you know, we hang different artists every month. I mean, we hang their work every month. And so it looks as though February's open. Okay, so that's that announcement. And on a Wednesday, we are having a members only event at the Nature Center. Because we now do more Zooming than ever, we wanted to keep in touch with our members. So we're inviting you to come on Wednesday between 2 and 3:30. We'll have a light refreshments, mingle, meet each other. And Jeff Weber, who works for Sarasota County, is going to give us a presentation about the Sarasota County Park system and what they're going through at the moment, by the way, with trying to recover from the 2 hurricanes, actually. So please join us. You don't have to register, just show up. And many of our board members will be there so that you can say hello to them. So that's that. Can't wait to see you at that. Oh, and on December the 3rd and 4th, we are having a Nature Center patio sale. That's being organized by Andy Schneider and Harmer and Lynn Jacobowitz and other helpers there. We have been receiving a lot of donated items, which we sort out and review. And if somebody wants to donate anything to us, it's our judgment whether we can sell it or whether we send it to Goodwill or whatever. But this is an opportunity. We have a lot of binoculars that can be sold and a lot of other things too. And Barry Rossheim's book collection, a lot of his books are in this sale too. So we hope to see you December 3rd and 4th between 9 and 3. And if you're inclined as a volunteer to sit out there and sort of guard the cash box or help people select things, that would be great too. So hope to see you. Our holiday luncheon, well, it's really going gangbusters. The last time I looked, we had over 60 people registered, and I think we can go much more than that, but that's a wonderful, wonderful, healthy number. Christine Johnson of the Conservation Foundation and I will be updating all of you on what's happening at the quad. So that will be a presentation at that luncheon. So just go ahead and register, and we'll be happy to see you. Another meet and mingle opportunity. And many of you may know John Ryan. He used to work for Sarasota County for the stormwater system and other departments as well. He is now a volunteer with Sarasota Baywatch, and they have, I don't know how the ownership of the Neville Preserve, but they have been given permission to rehabilitate it for wildlife. And what they want to do right now is to find out what kind of birds are there. And I know that Bob Clark from Venice Audubon has actually been out there with John, but I think John needs more people. You have to get out there by boat, and John can provide that. But I think if you had a goodly number of volunteers, you wouldn't be, you wouldn't have to do it once a week. I think he wants a lot of volunteers to spread it out, basically. So if you're inclined to do that, and who knows what's there, and you could also help John figuring out what kind of vegetation to be planted out there. So contact John at johnnyberries@gmail.com. And if you forget that, you can always contact info@sarasotaAudubon.org with any requests that you have, and we'll be able to funnel it to the right person. And last but not least, it's time to renew your membership. As you know, our membership goes on a calendar year basis. So on December 31st or January the 1st, it's a new year. So if you can renew now, you will save $5. After January the 2023 is going up to a massive $35. So here's an opportunity to get in there and save $5, and maybe you can spend it at the patio sale. So that's all right now. And I'm going to turn you over now to Margie, who will take it away. Margie. Is Margie, are you there?
Yes, yeah? I am.
Okay, sorry.
I'm here.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody on Wednesday. I like doing Zoom, but it's really nice to see people in person. So I look forward to seeing many of you on Wednesday. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker, Terry Rich, who is an Idaho ornithologist who's very focused on bird conservation, which I thought was a great attraction in having him speak for us. He's very interested in what we are doing and not doing to save birds nationally, and I think worldwide as well, right, Terry?
Hemispheric, anyway.
He's been doing that for over 30 years. He worked at the Bureau of Land Management for almost 8 years, and then at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as the National Coordinator for Partners in Flight for 14 years. And I think you'll tell us more about Partners in Flight, maybe. And then for the last 8 years, he's been the Senior Ornithologist for Solutions for Bird Conservation, and is also working on a PhD specifically on birders and their conservation efforts, their behavior, which I think is a very interesting topic. We all could be doing more for conservation as birders or not birders. So tonight from Boise, Idaho, Terry will share his insights from his national survey on birders and the actions they're taking for birds. There's a serious disconnect between birders' interests, the needs for bird conservation, and public policies for bird conservation in the United States. So an estimated 45 million Americans feed and or watch birds. One finding is that bird conservation messages are very important. I'm sure we all know that, but those from conservation organizations such as us were much more effective than those from public agencies. There's a huge opportunity for bird conservation initiatives And Terry's going to fill us in on all of that. So thank you very much, Terry. Take it away.
Thanks a lot, Margie. And thanks to y'all for inviting me to talk to you guys. When I saw Sarasota, it's like I had to look it up on a map. I mean, I knew you guys were in Florida. Well, I guess you're not. You're in Long Island and everywhere else, but at least part of the year in Florida. And I have a number of friends around there. I hope to come back and see some roseate spoonbills and limpkins and other things before long. And if I do, I'm definitely going to pop by your nature center. I'm really impressed by looking around your website, what your Audubon Society is doing and has done and is accomplishing. I mean, it's very impressive. So that's really cool. Good for you. I mean, if we had that sort of engagement, leadership, and education, you know, in every town your size or thereabouts, that would be really fantastic. Just a little bit more in my background, I guess. So I did work for the Bureau of Land Management as the national coordinator for migratory birds starting in 1992. And then I moved over to the Fish and Wildlife Service to coordinate the partnership Partners in Flight. And I hope you've heard of it, although you'll see as a result of my survey, I found out that an awful lot of birders in this country didn't know what these bird conservation initiatives that are working at the national, international level have been doing. So that was part of my sort of my stimulation to say, hey, you know what, I've been working 37 years. That's probably about right. Let's you know, move on to the next thing. And I'm sure more than a few of you out there kind of know maybe what I'm talking about. So let me bring up my screen. We'll make sure that's working all right. And then I will start into the conversation. And if you have questions, I guess you guys prefer to have it on Q&A rather than chat, but at any rate, hopefully the moderators can monitor that. I can't do that while I'm talking. And then toward the end, we'll get questions, unless there's something really pressing that you feel like has to be sort of addressed right away. I'm fine with that. I really prefer the interactive mode. So when I retired in 2014, I went back to school here at Boise State University. There's a Department of Public Policy, which is mostly sort of people that go in there are going to become state government people or mayors or city managers, that sort of thing. But there was a small environmental part to this. And when I didn't know that till I retired, and I'm looking around, what can I do now? And I found out they had this niche for environmental policy. And I was like, wow, this exactly meets my needs, because I had become frustrated with our inability to sort of gather the funding and the political power together to address the bird conservation needs that we all know so well. So there's sort of my problem statement, and it's already been read to you. So the puzzle is, we've got all these bird conservation needs, we've got all these birders. Why don't we have a bigger impact on public policies? And I'm thinking especially about state wildlife agencies and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this sort of graphically, I guess, shows the problem. I worked so hard in Partners in Flight and other initiatives, North American Bird Conservation Initiative, North American Waterfowl Management Plan, on that scientific foundation. And we've literally spent decades putting the science together to push it up to the decision makers. And these efforts were really enhanced when the North American Waterfowl Management Plan was passed in 1986, or approved, I should say. Then Partners in Flight came on, and then the Shorebird Group, and then the Waterbird Group, and others yet. And yet over all that time, it seemed like we were delivering all this information on what was needed, and not just that, but how to do it, and where to do it, and when to do it. And yet it's just not having that much of an effect on funding and real world money to help these things. At the same time, we have all this public interest in birds, all us birders running around, and that connection up to these policymakers I show by a dotted line, because I think it's just not happening. You know, it can be very powerful locally. It looks like you guys are doing a great job locally. I don't know how your, say your city and state government respond to what you're doing and what your other partner societies are doing. But at the national level, and certainly at even larger scales, like I say, I'm sort of keen on the Western Hemisphere because of our migratory birds, you know, make that connection. They're just not having the punch that I think that we could and should have. Just expanding a little bit on the idea of the scientific foundation, this is just, I hope you've seen some of these. This is just a few of the plans that have been put out in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years from Partners in Flight and NABC and Waterbirds and so on, State of the Birds, showing, you know, quite exactly what birds need our help, where and when, how much is it going to cost. You know, we've been cranking these out for quite a long time now. The last State of the Birds report from NABC in 2014 showed that about 22% of our species need some kind of conservation action. And I'm showing you this sort of background because that's when I retired, 2014. It's like, come on, we've got to be able to do more for these birds than we're doing. So I'll give you a little bit of an update. Then in 2016, another plan came out from Partners in Flight. Again, hopefully you're familiar with this. This is a screen grab of the watch list where we go down and rank all these species, starting with gunnison, sage grouse, and lesser prairie chicken, condors, and then working our way down to species in less and less urgent need. But the list of birds that really need a lot of help, you know, is quite large, as I'm sure you know. Just, I think last week, maybe the week before, is another State of the Birds report. This is, I don't know, maybe 7th, 8th, 9th in a series, again, focusing on just the US, not even Canada, not Canada, Mexico, not North America, but just the US. And you're undoubtedly aware of the 3 Billion Birds Gone initiative that came out maybe a year or two ago. But in this new plan, and if you haven't seen it, check it out on the web. It's about 8 pages. It's full of good stuff. They're using a new terminology called tipping point species. You can see there, these are 70 species in the US that have collectively lost about 2/3 of their populations in the last 50 years. So we used to use the term watch list. Now this is tipping point species. So they're futzing with the terms a little bit, but the point is to always look at where is the greatest need, what species, and what can we do about it? What do we know about the problems? And unfortunately, we're seeing downward trends in all the groups of birds: arid lands, eastern forests, western forests, shorebirds, boreal forest, Hawaii, coasts, on and on and on and on, except for wetlands. And this story keeps popping up, that what we've done because of the duck guys, because of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan in 1986, the incredible investment in wetlands and waterfowl, even though, yeah, people are shooting some of those birds, but the big picture is that this conservation initiative has been a huge success. And to this day, our ducks and our geese and our swans, it's still the only group that's increasing. It's still increasing. And I think you can even take out Canada geese, which most people are pretty tired of by now. It's still a really good success story. Sadly, all these other groups, you know, are going down. Already mentioned this survey. There's probably a new one coming out, I would guess any time, but from 2016, about 45 million people in the US are looking at birds or feeding birds. All kinds of statistics about, you know, how far they travel and are they really birders and on and on and on. But for me, if you sit in your living room and look at birds on the feeder in the backyard, you know, you're in the house. We want you to do more, basically. Again, going back in time a little bit, I need to update this, but this was part of the setup for my research. I started looking at the websites of the 50 state fish and wildlife agencies. It was like, okay, what are our state wildlife agencies telling people about migratory birds? And this is just looking at the home pages of these 50 agencies on 3 different dates before my survey went out to see what was going on. And you can see there's like no content there. Now, I hope that's changed. I haven't looked, you know, in the last few years. I hope that's changed. We'll see. But the reason I look at the state pages, because they're, you know, they're all closer to us than, say, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The national groups are great, national agencies and so on, but sometimes it's better, you're more effective if you're a little bit more local. And so I've been pressing the state wildlife agencies through the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, through meetings and so on, to say, hey, you guys aren't doing enough. Look at what you've got on your web page for birders. How can you get them engaged? Because, you know, we're not only going to help whatever, the Fish and Wildlife Service and the greater sage grouse out in our country, but if we get more engaged at your state level, we're going to help your income. We're going to help your, you know, your positive reviews and all that stuff. So I think they're so far have been really missing the boat in not reaching out to 45 million people. It seems to me that's just nuts. So again, just sort of graphically showing that my interest in my research was what does public interest looks like. I won't spend any time on this, but I just wanted to show you there's a model that comes out of natural resources, particularly out of the Fort Collins, Colorado State University group, who's been working on human dimensions for a long time. And they've modeled, you know, how do people behave and why do they do what they do? And this starts out with these, at the very bottom level, with these very deep personal values that are known to be very hard to change. I mean, these are things we form very early in life from our parents, the people around us, and those values, you know, they become set. You're not going to change people's values very, very readily, but you can change their behaviors ultimately through norm activation. I think that's really interesting. Basically, that's just, if you do something, do you do it because your spouse told you, or your Audubon Society informed you, or your friends are doing it? What is it that sort of pushes you to say, you know, I'm giving $100 this time, not just $5. So that to me is very interesting. And also over on the side, information sources and knowledge. You know, what are there good links between the information that's being sent out there and what people actually do? Well, we know there's not very often. We're just bombed with information. And how do people choose to say, hey, that's important information, I'm going to act on it? So huge arena, crosses way beyond conservation, obviously, into every aspect of human life and human behavior. So briefly on the methods, I sent an online survey to birders in 50 states, and any of you who completed my survey, I really appreciated it. I appreciate it to this moment. Actually, I'm not done with my degree yet. So that was really interesting enterprise. I met a lot of interesting people and organizations like yours. I had 24 independent variables, and we'll go through those in just a little bit of detail, not too much. The bottom line was these 19 behaviors. You know, what do you do and why? That was the bottom line. I got a hold of 285 individuals and groups, mostly Audubon societies, frankly, and some other birding groups around the country. I got back 5,500 surveys that were completed enough to be useful. I don't know what the response rate is. You know, that's not very good out of 45 million people, but I think there's some evidence from the data I collected that it may be a representative sample, reasonably representative. It's probably biased towards those who take conservation action, but this is generally true of surveys in any arena of life. Those people who are kind of keen and active respond to surveys, and other people don't. So we've got, you know, sort of that built-in bias. If you're tech oriented at all, I use Qualtrics for the survey, Excel to look at the data and clean it, and then SPSS for analysis, and 0.01 significance values. So I was interested in these arenas. How does birding interest and intensity influence people's behavior? Do your childhood experiences suggest anything? And of course, the literature is full of childhood experiences and how they have impacted lives. Certainly my childhood led me to become a birder and an ornithologist. I think I could have possibly turned out very differently, but that's what my parents did. We know that important people in childhood can have an enormous effect on what you do as an adult. Teachers, parents would come to mind. I had 3 questions on general attitudes and values. Some questions on knowledge of bird conservation. Again, we know that just dumping information doesn't necessarily result in behaviors that we want, but is there a link? Is it very strong? I wanted to look at, this was trickier than I thought, actions intended. You know, we all intend to do lots of things we don't do. Can you figure out, is there any room there to understand, you know, I almost gave Sarasota, you know, $1 million, but I didn't. Why? What happened? Can we figure that out? Norm activation, I already talked about. When you make decisions, do you refer to your spouse, your friends, your birding group, your church? What is it? What is it that moves you to take action? And then finally, standard demographics, you know, age, education, income, and so on. Those are standard parts of all this sort of social science research. So we'll get into some results. First, I was rather pleased to see this age curve. There's this kind of conventional wisdom that I just turned 73, that all birders are like old, and you can see it skewed a little bit over to the, you know, to those late 60s or so, the most people, but look at a lot of people in the younger age categories all the way down to teenagers. And that wasn't a big sample size, but I got some pretty young people, and a lot of people in the middle and younger for sure. So I was happy to see that. 57% of the people who responded were female, and I learned that this is absolutely typical, that females respond better than males to any survey of any kind that you send out there. And if that's not a topic for a conversation at happy hour, I don't know what else I can do for you, but that's really a good one. Very interesting. This really surprised me. I asked people where they were on the political spectrum, and they could go from zero, actually I flipped this so it was randomized. You could go from very conservative to very liberal. And if you look way over there at the right, that gigantic spike, that's 800 respondents who said they were very liberal. I had no idea I was going to get this kind of a response. But again, you can see, even though the numbers are lower, we have people way down on the conservative end all the way down to very conservative. So it's kind of an odd distribution. Again, not what I expected at all, but there you go. And this is the kind of information I think it should be pretty useful to people writing messages, right, and communicating. They need to know where we are, what are we thinking in all sorts of ways. And the political spectrum is one of those, you know, it's one of those attributes that if you know what these people are like, you can be much more effective with messaging. These people, I mean us. I was also very interested in the regional, if there were regional differences. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies is broken into 4 regions: Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, and West. And there are entire organizations there. If you don't know, of course, you guys are in the Southeast, and a lot of policy is cooked up and discussed in committee meetings at the regional level. So it's not just the national level, but the regional level, where there are opportunities to input into, you know, our what we would like to see for policies, public policies. So a few more results. I'm going to have to move this box out of the way so I can see my own screen. There we go. So here are 4 metrics of birding interest. So just so you know, one of the questions was, how many days per month do you spend birding at least an hour away from home? And I figured that sort of separates out the real birders from the rest. But like I said, I love bird feeders too. You don't have to go anywhere to be, you know, in my target audience. And you can see that range, the full gamut, all the way from never to every day of the month. That's me. I go out every day. On average, 5.8. So these are not like crazy birders, you know, going out every day like me and maybe a lot of you. It's only 5.8 days a month going out like that. So again, I don't think we're just looking at, I didn't just capture like extreme crazy birders, but every sort of more casual birder. And that's what I'm really interested in. Looking at how big is your life list? You know, I'm not sure I believe either one of these extreme numbers I got back. Somebody said they had one, so I don't believe that. And somebody said they had 10,012, and I don't believe that one either. But the distribution of those life lists was much like some of the other distributions. There's people in every sort of spectrum, from thousands of species to, say, hundreds, maybe somebody who's just starting. I asked about bird feeding by saying, what, you know, how many feeders are you taking care of? Again, an enormous variety of respondents here, all the way from people who have no feeders, probably people on the 8th floor of a apartment building maybe can't muster a feeder or anything to come to it, all the way up to 50. This was open-ended, so if they had 100, I would have gotten 100. So again, an enormous spread in how many feeders people are maintaining, with an average of right about 5. And then finally asking people about what sorts of lists they keep. You know, I already heard about life lists, but do you keep a yard list, a year list, a county list, a state list, you know, that sort of thing. People kept on the average about 2 kinds of lists. So again, I think this points to the fact that this population that I sampled they're not really extreme, you know, crazy lister type birders. It's really a wide mix. So you got people maybe like me who keep a yard list and a life list, and that's it. After reading about all the childhood experience influences, there's a lot of literature about this in psychology and natural resources, really a lot of literature in every aspect. Everybody wants to know why people do things, and looking at their childhood experiences, their education, all that is really a big one. So I first asked people to just sort of rank these sorts of experiences. And these questions come right out of a lot of research that's already been done. And you can see, I won't read through all these, but you can see number 1, 68% of my respondents ranked outdoor play as very important to shaping their attitude about the environment. That's what this was about, shaping your attitude. Vacations to outdoor locations. Slightly over half said that was very important in shaping my attitude. I grew up in Wisconsin, but my mom was from Texas, and we would go to Texas every 2-3 years to visit my grandparents on that side. And I can't begin to explain how important going into the cactus and the rattlesnakes and the tarantulas to look at birds was for me. It was enormously important, had a huge impact on my life. Reading about nature, I was surprised at how many people said reading about nature was important. And you can see the others: hiking, camping, visits to social media, visits to zoos. Social media obviously wasn't very important because it didn't exist for a lot of the people in the sample. Looking at the importance of particular people, you can see the rankings here. I was surprised that either father or mother wasn't at a higher percentage than that. So again, the question is, how important were these people towards shaping your attitude toward the environment? So here's father, maybe not too surprising as number 1, but only 36.8%. And actually, you know, almost 18% said their father was not important. Interesting, it's kind of similar numbers from other adults. And I was honestly flabbergasted that teacher didn't get a higher score. I guess that shows how important your own experiences are. I had some teachers that were absolutely critical to me. I thought everybody had teachers like that. Obviously, they didn't. I was very interested to know, to judge people's knowledge. You know, what do these birders know about different things? And one of them was, you know, what are the important factors affecting bird populations? And I already had, you know, an idea that we can rank. We already know how to kind of at least rank these. Habitat loss, number 1. We know that's very important. Most people judge that it was very important. Cat predation, very important, number 1 cause in the US and in Canada. That was judged to be very important. Collisions with windows, same thing, important factor. People knew it was important. And those two are really big because we can, and I don't know what y'all are doing, but we can influence cat predation and collisions with windows, right? Those are very direct conservation outreach programs that have been underway for decades. from a lot of sources, notably the American Bird, ABC, American Bird Conservation Initiative. But then you get down to the next ones, collisions with wind turbines. People thought that was really super important. And when you look at the numbers, you know, it's so far, it's only a small factor. Same with collisions with towers. And I'll cut to the chase. You can see that the audience, the sampled audience, judged every factor to be very important, including illegal shooting, which is really bad news in a few specific places. We have knuckleheads shooting long-billed curlews right here in Idaho, with curlews with radio collars and wing tags and bands. So we know people are having serious impacts very locally, but as a you know, bird-wide, population-wide, continent-wide factor, it's not an important factor compared to these other things. So right there, it became quite obvious that all these birders out there were not distinguishing not even subtleties, the major differences in sources of mortality. So here's an education tool.
Terry's cut out from me.
I worked in.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
No, you.
Sorry.
Okay, there we go. We had lost you.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry. Do you want me to back up?
yeah.
Where?
You were almost to you were talking about the previous slide.
This one?
Yeah, and I think you were almost done with it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess my concluding point was simply that the sampled audience judged every one of these factors to be very important, right? And they're not. They vary a great deal in their impact. I was just making the point that illegal shooting is a really serious problem very locally for certain species, but it's not on the scale of habitat loss or cat predation. So we have an opportunity on the education arena to be more effective in communicating to birders what the big problems are. Okay, so the next thing on the sort of the information side of things was, how familiar are you with these initiatives? And as I said, I was very disappointed to see this, that 30 to 40% of our respondents did not know about these major conservation initiatives, including Partners in Flight, North American Waterfowl Management Plans, State of the Birds Report, State Wildlife Action Plans, where a lot of stuff is happening. So again, I think our education outreach is falling down in a big way. Going the wrong way. So getting to norm activation, I mentioned this a couple of times because I think it's really interesting to figure out why people do what they do. And it turns out that most people do what they do due to their own sense of what's right, 65%, and the others are much, much lower. So this is interesting, but it's very hard to tear apart. You know, what is your own sense of what's right? That gets back to those deep, deep values that were formed early in life, and it's really hard to get into that and change it or alter it. But I was very happy to see number 2, at least, that messages from conservation organizations were pretty effective. 24%, yeah, that's not, I wish it was 100%, but at least we know those are getting through. And especially if you look down to messages from your state wildlife agency, 5.6%, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, 4.8%. Our public agencies are having like no impact here. So at least we know that conservation organizations are 4 or 5 times as effective at reaching. So that's really actionable. We can really work on that. So let's look at some of the conservation actions. This is the things I was trying to predict. 83% of the people said they'd made their yard more desirable for birds. I'd like to dig way deeper into that, but again, I think this is a massive opportunity for us. to tell people about native species fruiting, native species flowering, you know, how you can help every bird just passing through your yard by planting the right stuff. We know all this, but I think it's an enormous opportunity and shows an openness to keep building on that piece. That's huge. Renewed my memberships in conservation organizations. You know, that's probably not too bad, 75% renewed. Again, you'd like to see it be 100. People love to share bird content on social media. They're voting where their values are. Like a lot of people are e-birding, right? And sending in their lists. So that helps the Science Foundation, which leads to these reports and these assessments. And then you can see a couple others there. Christmas bird counts, popular, contributing time to Audubon societies and others. Voting to support policies, people are doing that. So we see actions that we really like and we can really build on. Write emails, wrote letters, made calls, led bird walks. You can read down through the rest of those. People are giving a lot of time and contributing in a lot of different ways. The least popular thing that people did that I gave them as an option was to write editorials to newspapers, articles from magazines or blogs. And I think this is another arena where we can really up our contributions. You know, everybody's writing about everything, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. We maybe can help by increasing really easy, simple, fun stories about birds and bird conservation, bird needs, using the media outlets that we have available to us. So getting down toward the end here, so all this is fine. It's interesting that, you know, people will say, for example, my childhood, you know, outings in nature, outdoor play, camping in outdoor locations, vacations, that is, in outdoor locations, were enormously important. But if you go to that second item right there, and now we're into statistics, which of these things predict what people did? You can see though all those childhood experiences with nature had almost no effect on their behavior, at least the way I collected data and the way I analyzed it. I was shocked to see this. But let's go back to the top. Birding interest and intensity. That's where a lot of the bang is. People who are already in are in. And maybe we probably see this and know this from our own experiences with our own birding friends. So those people who are already out there, those are the guys we probably already worn them out, but we know they're in the house. Important people in childhood had no statistical effect. Stunning. But remember, dad is only like 36% most important. So these people just didn't come through as predictors of behavior. Knowledge of bird conservation. I'm going to skip attitudes right now because that's kind of a fuzzy one. Knowledge of bird conservation, 16 times knowledge of bird conservation had a positive impact on their behaviors. This is a good sign. Obviously, we are dumping knowledge out there. It has some effect. We just need it to have more effect. Same with information sources. People who are getting information from certain places are acting on it. We see norm activation, friends and family. Those are important. You know, get everybody in the house and get them all doing this stuff together. And then, not too surprising, demographics is way too much to go into. You will thank me for not dragging you through all that, but sort of predictable things about, you know, people that are more educated, people that have more income. Yeah, they can travel more. If you're more educated, you're going to do more. You know, a lot of things like that are some that were fairly predictable in that they affect all sorts of decision making and human behaviors. Those things are all actionable because you can target males versus females or non-binary. You can target small towns versus big towns. You can target educated versus not so educated. You can craft messages for those niches to be more effective. So a couple of summary slides and then I'll stop. I didn't get as many responses I would have liked, but I think those early first few slides showed that I captured really a wide variety of birders. I got people who feed like 1 million birds and people who don't feed birds, people who have huge live lists and people who have no live lists. You know, a really nice broad array, I think, of the birding public. I was very happy to see that. The surprise was that birders tend to be strongly liberal. The childhood experiences, people said they were important, and I believe they were, surely they were, but it didn't seem to come through to show that that affected what they're doing as adults. I would love to go deeper on that with a more detailed survey. No particular adult in childhood, teacher, mom, dad, friend, had a really clear impact on behavior. So that's another interesting one. There are many, many, many gender differences. I've got a whole talk on that. I think I've got a article coming out in birding from the American Birding Association on just on gender. So there's a lot of differences between males and females, no surprise there. Birding interest and knowledge was really important. I mean, people who know what was going on and were getting messages, particularly from conservation organizations, are doing things. But 30 to 40% of the people don't know what these initiatives are up to. So, you know, somehow we got to make that connection a little stronger. And then finally, really hugely actionable, that bird conservation messages from NGOs, from Audubon societies, from state birding groups, whatever, those were coming through. People were listening and hearing and acting, but messages coming from state wildlife agencies and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, 5% effectiveness. So almost nothing there. Maybe not so shocking when you, as I said, you look at the state wildlife agency websites and they're not talking about birds or birding or migratory birds or anything else. Why would they have an impact on birders? So I think that's a huge opportunity. 50 agencies that can do much more. So sort of in conclusion then, I think one thing that we failed at, that is me, I speak of Partners in Flight of the North American Bird Conservation Initiative. We've been talking up the line, you know, we've been talking to, you know, national and state leadership in agencies. And I think we got to put more energy in going straight across to birders. Get these messages and these State of the Birds reports. We got to do more to get the messages straight into the birders' hands, so we at the grassroots level know what's going on, and then I think that'll be more effective. I think my last slide then is, if there are any statisticians out there, I'm going to employ structural equation modeling to look at the model. That's kind of a nerdy thing for journals that a lot of people won't care about, to look at the cognitive hierarchy model. But again, from the practical side, sharing this information and working directly with the conservation partnerships like Partners in Flight, the North American Bird Conservation Initiative, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and their regional associations. And then of course, I'm already getting some articles out into birding magazines. I write a weekly newspaper column, so every once in a while I give them some stuff there, but that just reaches kind of a local regional audience. Try to get out to the popular literature, and then of course getting into journal articles so that other practicing ornithologists and conservationists, like through Conservation Biology, Journal of Wildlife Management, a few other journals like that, trying to get it more into practitioners' hands so they can think about how, you know, what does this mean? Can we go deeper on this? Can we make this more effective? Maybe can we do more research to illuminate exactly where we can act with a little bit more precision. So there's my email if you don't have it. And if you don't have a chance to looks like we've got a few 25 or so Q&As and chats, but if you want to follow up in some other way, I would be very happy to hear from you. Amphispiza, that was my master's bird. Sage sparrow, now sagebrush sparrow. I'll be very happy to hear from you. I will stop sharing, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was very, very provocative and so useful and kind of stumping in some ways. I mean, I thank you for doing this, and I hope you'll pursue it much more. Obviously, you're really going in the right direction, that state agencies and national agencies really need to know much more. And this is very, very interesting. I had one question, and I'm probably nitpicking, but do most birders really go 1 hour away every time they bird? I mean, I bird locally fanatically every day. So and I think a lot of my friends do as well.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know. There were a lot of different ways I could have phrased that question, but I was just trying to, if you look at published surveys, they vary a lot in how that's measured. And I sort of just picked one. It's like, well, if people are going to go for an hour, they're going to be pretty serious. So that was just kind of a way to look at that sort of seriousness aspect. These surveys are all imperfect, I'm afraid.
Well, thank you for all this work. I think it's very important. And frankly, it's more important now that I've heard you talk about it. I think please beat the drum so people know more what's needed.
Thank you. It's really a bummer to have gotten my results right when COVID shut down everything, right? And I'm normally on the conference tours and go to 2, 3, 4 conferences a year and present to large audiences. And it was like, and you can only Zoom so many times, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. So that was kind of bad timing, but yeah, I'm looking forward. In fact, we're going to have, I hope to have my first national presentation in the spring in Fort Collins at a fairly big conference there. And then also at the American Ornithological Society in Canada in the summer. So hopefully I can hit some live people face to face and yeah, beat the drums, keep beating the drums for sure.
So we have some questions. Is hunting and selling birds a problem in the US?
Say that again, Margie.
Is hunting and selling birds a problem in the US?
I would say hunting is not a problem, although I have a little bit of a beef about still hunting greater sage grouse in my part of the world, as their populations just keep going down. It's like, I don't get it. The agencies argue that, yeah, it's compensatory mortality and it doesn't really hurt. They're going to die anyway. But, when these birds get to a certain level, I think you got to stop hunting. You just got to stop it. I think we know that cage bird trade probably only impacts a few species. I mean, obviously, I think painted buntings are still being hurt, right? But maybe because of capture in Cuba and places south of you guys, but mostly I think no.
Someone asked also about planting and gardens and birds.
That's a little general. I would say, plant native species that fruit and flower, right? And don't necessarily trust your local greenhouse or nursery to know what's what. You get a lot of sort of temporary help in there. They're going to sell you stuff from China. So, go to your go to your native plant society or whatever resource, your nature center perhaps, say, here's the 10 best fruiting trees if you want to have, mockingbirds or robins or whatever you're after in your yard. Go to a real source. Don't trust the vendors to tell you what's what.
So the question was a little more specific. Okay. It's coming from the Native Plant Society. And she asks, did you have any questions regarding use of native plants to create habitat for bird in the yard?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that would have been, unfortunately, with these surveys, you're really limited in the number of questions you can have because people lose interest after like about 20 questions. They quit answering it and walk away. So going a little deeper on native plants, a little deeper on childhood experiences, I would love to have been asked more follow-up questions. I'm a big native plant guy. My dad was an amateur botanist in Wisconsin. I learned 1,000 plants before I even looked up and identified one bird. So I'm all about plants. Oop.
Yeah. Wow.
Getting a glitch. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah,
we got the last answer. So it was a little.
I have a question or a comment. Have all the questions been answered?
Yes.
Okay. What I know you didn't. I'm not. This is a comment about one of the ways that we in Sarasota have been quite successful in working with the county in order to get our own piece of land, and which we rent from the county actually, and also in trying to help save other parcels in our area. And one of the things that we use, or we push ecotourism. Here in Florida, of course, we're a big visitor state. We have so many visitors annually. It's just incredible. But the one thing that the county administration understood was that with our native plant gardens and the wonderful bird life in Florida, we generate income through ecotourism, and they understood that. They got that right away, and it was the hook that we really used in order to really help get what we want, to save some land and to encourage people to get outdoors and to do birding. So that's definitely one way of whoever's listening, who's ever working with Audubons and their local counties, this is one way. It's a very strong argument for getting them to do what you want.
Yeah. No, I think I hear you, and I think we've had some success here in the Boise area as well. They're very tuned to quality of life, to attract, in our case, not so much tourists. We're not a big tourist destination really, but we've got a lot of tech industry. We've got a lot of corporate headquarters, and when they're pitching, why should you put your business headquarters here? Those sorts of things are huge. People want parks. They want to, maybe not birds per se, but they want nice areas to go recreate in with their families, and that's huge. Everybody understands that.
Yeah. So. Did your survey? I may have forgot. Missed it. But did your survey look at education levels?
Yeah. That was one of the demographic parameters that I looked at, and I didn't go into that because it takes quite a bit more time. But probably nothing too surprising there. It seems a fairly common pattern that people with more education tend to be a little bit more engaged in this sort of stuff. People with higher incomes, but not like super like overriding. It doesn't necessarily override everything, just, getting people another degree doesn't necessarily push them into a very active mode. But again, sort of predictable relationships that have been shown in all sorts of surveys like this.
Oh,
Could you say that generally birders are more intellectual or is that not accurate? I know that people locally have always told me, oh, of course you're a birder because you're a reader, you're interested in, we're sort of bird nerds, book nerds to begin with. But does that make sense? I
think found? Yes, I think those relationships again are pretty broad and pretty well established by a lot of different research. People that become more educated, become more interested and active in all sorts of things. And I think that's one reason why continuing to push on education is, even though it's sometimes hard to measure exactly what result it had, it's generally a very good strategy.
Oh, great.
Well, this is just, I really, really appreciate, again, what you're doing, and that you're looking at all of this. And I wonder too, should you be coordinating more with eBird or Cornell, or does that just not make sense with what you're doing?
No, it makes perfect sense. In fact, as soon as I conceived of this research, I immediately I'm a big eBirder myself. I just passed my 10,000th checklist this spring. I eBird literally every day. And of course, I know a lot of people at Cornell. I love all their programs. I mean, Merlin's Song ID is just killing it. I can't believe how good it is.
And how many people get to be birders because they're using Merlin's sound app, not the photo app. So all of you, please use it.
I show it to everybody. I mean, I was at a couple family gatherings this summer with people. They don't even know one bird from another, literally. And I said, look at this cool app. And they're like doing it. So it's like, wow, I just recorded a cardinal. I'm going, yeah, cool, huh?
You make a hit in the bar with that.
Just getting back to the original question, that's true. It's fabulous. Getting back to the original question, I really wanted to get the survey to eBirders. They have so much research they're doing themselves for their own purposes out of Cornell, that they said, if we got to do a couple of grad students right here at the university, so they declined. So I was pretty bummed about that. But I won't harangue them. They do something good. I'll fit in the best I can. Yep, we're dead again.
I have
Go ahead.
Okay.
I just have one more question. You said that you wrote a weekly column for a newspaper, did you say?
Yes.
And how lengthy is that? And are you what do you talk about? What's a typical column?
My target's 14 to 1,500 words. I use photos from local photographers, and I cover. I'm at the end of 3 years of this every week, so I cover every topic I can think of. I'm doing turkeys for next week, right? Turkey. What about the wild turkey? I cover Christmas bird counts, eBird, breeding bird survey, conservation initiatives, bird behavior, bird feeding, bird evolution. Although I don't get too deep into nerdy stuff because I have a really, really broad audience, and so I try to keep it sort of at a level where like anybody can grasp it. But I love to bring in science, where I can. I try to hook people, but I don't want to bore them to death, right? With
yeah, right. 1,500 words is a lot. That's a lot of work.
In fact, one of the editors said, you might want to cut these back in case you run out of content. And I said, well, I will if I do, but so far, bird world's a big world. It's a big world.
Yeah.
We do have one more question.
Okay.
Is there a benefit of keeping bird feeders over native planting?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's interesting.
That's a good one. All the stuff I've ever read about feeding birds and the various trade-offs, I'm sort of at the place where I think it's a fairly minor impact ideally, I suppose, if your yard was just full of great stuff, then you wouldn't need to feed. Mine is not. I have a little trouble growing stuff here, but I think feeding is fine, and it's much more accessible to some people. Obviously, I think native plants, flowering, fruiting plants would be the best thing for everybody to shoot for. But whether there's an advantage or not, I'd rather see a sunflower seed feeder out in the backyard than a cat, or nothing. So, if it's fairly easy to do and it's going to be helpful, mostly helpful, probably, I got to go for it.
I can just address that a little. Cornell, whether it was a formal or informal study, determined that feeding only supplements about 10% of a bird's diet. So it's not as though they're, that's the only thing they're eating. So if it's only 10%, that's my argument for you can have feeders, that it can work. Yeah, and certainly in the wintertime, yeah.
That's a really good point. And I don't know how many times I've looked out my yard and going, how come there aren't any birds eating seeds today? Well, my house finches and juncos and nuthatches, they're eating something somewhere else. I guess they don't need me. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And thank God it's like that, because we don't want to have them dependent on our feeders. God help us.
Yeah.
Well, 10% is not much at all. So
that's right. Yeah, that's good to know. I need to look that study up.
Well, thank you so much. it's just great that you could join us, and it's nice to get the perspective, not only nationally, but also from Idaho and parts west.
Yeah, it's a little different world here. I'm looking at your bird lists and things going, hearing about spoonbills. It's like, wow.
Well, we should do trades. I'll visit you and you can visit me.
Absolutely. Hey, you're welcome in Boise. I'm sitting in a room that's mostly empty except for my bird stuff. Any birders are welcome here anytime.
And likewise, thank you very much. So
Thank
next month, we're going to have the head of Save Our Seabirds, Aaron Virgin, will be talking to us about rescue, rehabilitate, and release. So he's going to bring us up to date on Save Our Seabirds, which the initials are SOS. And in light of the hurricanes, I'm sure he'll have even more updates than when we originally scheduled him. So please join us again next month on the second Monday of the month. So we'll see you then. Thank you all.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank
it was
you.
Wonderful, really wonderful.
Fun.
Yeah, really great. Karen, before you leave, maybe you could flash up the
Oh, yes.
the opening things again. That would be great.
Okay.
Another reminder.
So just go through everything. Yeah.
So call for artists.
Yeah. Here we go.
Call for artists and photographers for the show, the February showing. Next one is Jeff Weber on Wednesday. Can't wait to see Jeff. Who's a really good birder and a friend of birds. Be fun to talk to him. And that sale, come out to the sale and see what you can find. And I'm sure Barry Rossheim's book collection is vast, and so it would be fun to go through all of the books of all of the countries he's been to. And holiday lunch, looking forward to seeing you all there. That would be wonderful. And John, don't forget John, he wants volunteers to help out at the Neville Preserve in Roberts Bay. So you can contact him at that address or info@sarasotaAudubon.org. Okay. So, oh, and renew. Now we just had that lesson from Terry Rich. So here's your opportunity to step up to the plate and renew your annual dues. So thanks, everybody. Wonderful to see